Check.
Test 1, 2,
5.
This is Mr.Nobody, episode
28.
part 1. I'll make episode 29. In the background is a song that I wrote called
The End of the World.
That's relevant because
What I'm about to do.
what I'm about to do. And here's the deal. My daughter approached me and said, Dad, I did ayahuasca or DMT, some form of toad excretion.
As I've said,
I'm not a stranger to experimenting.
with psychedelics.
There was even a time in my youth, my early 20s,
when I lived in San Francisco,
and I had this experience. It began on a sunny and still Thanksgiving morning. The morning of Thanksgiving Day. An acquaintance of mine from the streets named Ben flagged me and my roommate Frank down on the other side of the panhandle.
a friend,
Ben,
very interesting guy.
somewhere between homeless and transcending homelessness, I don't know how else to put it, named Ben. Ben was always Ben, but somehow he would show up on the streets in a new persona
5.
every time I saw him. Some days I would see him, he'd be a French painter. Another time, like a serious blues musician. And then other times he'd have
Marching band.
outfits on, or an ascot. I don't know where he got his clothes, but he had a sense of style and enjoyment of life. Ben was big. He was like 6'5". He was African American. He had just the most diverse friends too. He would just see and connect with the craziest people in the streets in those days of San Francisco. Like a circus, like an insane asylum, in a good way. Anyway, Ben flagged us down. We were gonna spend a little time with him. He would tell me sometimes, yeah, I don't have a place to stay right now. Ben, completely mellow guy. I can't remember if Ben played guitar, but there was something about music and Ben that he'd always have these fucked up Walkmans with him.
The age of the rock band.
And he liked all kinds of music. He and I used to bat that stuff around. Beautiful cat. Ben. My roommate at the time, but also a very close brother.
Older brother.
We're walking out on the street on Thanksgiving morning.
Of course, we were
Communists or anarchists. We weren't doing Thanksgiving per se, and we run into Ben. Now I remember that I'm supposed to be going to my sister's. My sister had moved to San Francisco. She was a year and a half.
younger than
She was living just a block away from me with her boyfriend. So I was supposed to drop my sister's for some form of Thanksgiving. She was making a turkey in her tiny little studio apartment. Some invitation that was for me, but not necessarily for my roommate. And anyway, so that's going on. My friend and I, let's call him Frank, walk out into the street of San Francisco. It's over by the Panhandle, if you know that area. And I see Ben. Ben sees us from across the park. We wave hey, and we're in a kind of a giddy mood. And I remember Ben saying, you guys are having fun. You know what? I want to show you something. We were on our way somewhere to have coffee and a muffin, but he's like, I gotta show you something. Okay, let's see what you got. We'll have to walk into the park. There was a timeless moment, I suppose, and we said,
Okay.
lead the way. Ben leads us into the park, and we knew Golden Gate Park, but there are these little tributaries, these little paths that break off and become their own little section of the park.
You get lost there.
And it's all overgrown. There's many of these little areas. We're going into the park for about a half an hour when we're finally like, Ben, what the fuck, man?
He's like, no.
Just come with me, man. Don't ask questions. We're like, well, okay. He's either gonna have sex with us or I don't know what's gonna happen, but he was insistent. I have something to show you.
I have something to show you.
Frank and I were willing to go further, deeper into the park. Mind you, it's the morning of Thanksgiving and there's nobody in there. It is a desolate 11 o'clock. Finally, we get into this one little area. Ben breaks off the path and cuts just into the foliage. And we sort of lose track of him for a second because we have to push away branches and jostle our way up this hill. And there's all kinds of overgrownness going on. And then we see Ben, the crest of this mound. That's in the jungle, where this mound is sort of sunlit because the trees have broken a bit around it. And we're in this very private little area. Ben is not standing. Ben is on his knees. And not only is he on his knees, but Ben is eating something. And we were interested in what the hell was going on. So as we approach Ben, he turns to us with his mouth and his huge hands happen to be holding something. 5 or 6 of these little tiny mushrooms were stained blue.
Man, try these.
Just wait. This is a little crazy because I knew Ben from the streets, but none of us are fungologists. But here he was, munching these things down. And so, we did as Ben suggested. And my friend and I ate however many of these things that we found. Let me explain a little bit about that. When we looked down in the ground, it was overgrown grass, and you couldn't see any mushrooms. These were tiny little things. Grass was wet because it had rained the night before. We started noticing that if we gently pushed away little bits of the grassy area, you would see a mushroom all of a sudden. Where one appeared not to be there before, there was. And they were different sizes. There would be a daddy mushroom and a mommy mushroom. And then we would find a few more as we were stilling ourselves, quieting ourselves for the experience. And before we knew it, we each had a handful, maybe 10 of these mushrooms each. Frank and I looked at each other and said, fuck it, it's not killing Ben. He's obviously done this before. Yeah, Cinco. Let's see what happens. And we popped them in our mouths and started chewing on them. Now, I know some of you have eaten certain kinds of mushrooms. These are not cultivated. You can never find these at, concerts. These are very rare, ones we found. And they did taste like dog poop and socks mixed with worms.
Uno.
A powerful poop worms. But eat them we did. And Ben was smiling, and he was nodding, and he was calm. All his excitement abated, and it became this watching us. And over the next 10 minutes, I think we started to feel something, and we were nodding like,
Yeah, I think I'm starting to feel something.
I think I'm starting to feel something.
and Ben was like,
I'm feeling something.
and then Ben said, happy trails.
Happy trails.
I gotta go. What?
Yeah, man, I gotta go.
Okay, cool.
We know the way home.
And off Ben went. Knowing that I was supposed to visit my sister's little tiny apartment, I said to Frank, hey man, we should get going. Scrambling off this mound that we later dubbed the temple, found ourselves back to the tiny little path that led to this area. And we were astonished that Ben knew, or anyone knew, where to go and where exactly to find these things. We never found them anywhere else. Yeah, so we're making our way
Down the path.
and we finally come out onto the broad area of the park where there are some large lawn. In our haste to be responsible and get back to my appointment, we had almost forgotten that we had eaten these mushrooms. And although we were sort of grinning at Ben and appreciative of the experience, we weren't exactly feeling altered, not quite.
Dos.
But then it hit us. the park, I turn and say something to Frank. And Frank looks at me and says something to me. And neither one of us can understand what the other person just said. But it's the funniest fucking thing. And we're literally falling off the path. Barely able to walk straight.
And out of our minds,
Kaleidoscopic,
completely physical,
and psychological.
altered consciousness.
I mean, some people call it tripping balls. It doesn't quite capture it. We were out of our bodies. We were in our bodies, but out of them at the same time. We were no longer the people we were.
5.
Doing the thing that we were supposed to be doing. It seemed completely fucking absurd to be trying to get to my sister's apartment to acknowledge Thanksgiving as we were stumbling
From the hot sun.
down this path. Very thankful that there was nobody around us. We were somewhere else. The ground was moving underneath us like a giant conveyor belt, and we were just laughing and stumbling and trying to make sense.
And yet,
Didn't need to
overthink it.
It's what was happening. The absurdity of everything became crystal clear. It became incredibly fun.
It's what's happening.
What an alleviation from all the pressure and all the presumption of importance.
And we're laughing. We're just standing still.
And the world is just turning. And we don't even know how we're moving through space. We're literally falling out of our shoes. Frank actually wore these stupid flip-flop moccasins, and as he was twisting and turning around on them, they actually fell off his feet. That fucked us up. And we hope that people don't see us and start pointing and going like,
Arrest them.
Arrest them.
They're high on mushrooms.
and so we're staggering out of the park, tripping our balls off. Such a different reality from where we were just an hour ago or a half hour ago or
Who knows about time? It was another reality.
another reality. We make it back to the Panhandle, and my buddy is like, what do you want to do? And I said, I have to go see my sister. We're in front of her building. He's like, okay. And so we hit the buzzer, and I said, just take a minute. Let's just stop in and just see how things are proceeding. And we're trying to keep it together every moment. And we're just flying, we're floating. It's like we're angels, and we're just drifting up these stairs. And all of a sudden, we're at her door. Can't remember if I knocked or rang. But when the door opened, and she opened the door, it was my sister, but it's almost like it was a doppelganger, because everybody was somebody else. They were who they really were, not who
I thought they were.
emotions. I'm just beholding her, and she doesn't know her.
Tripping our fucking faces off on mushrooms, but we just
Picked off the ground.
8.
I'm trying to just be normal, but we are splitting our faces open, laughing at the dumbest shit. But also, there's a emotional component to these mushrooms. It's not just fun and games or let's go dance.
like I could see a fucking angel or God or something.
And then my sister opens the oven and she slides out the turkey, which is halfway. What does the oven do? Bake? And we lost our shit. It was like a person. It sounds terrible, but we lost our shit. I said, I gotta go. I think my friend was out the door. All of it was just too outrageous. It was out of context. Or certainly, there's no eating. There's no eating of food when you're on these. We bid our goodbye and got out of there fast. Just remember my sister's perplexed look, and off we went. It's not important what happened after that so much, but what is important is that my friend and I went back to that Temple Mount over the course of 2 years, almost 2 years, I think it lasted. And we started picking them and eating them fresh, and then picking as many as we could find and bringing them home and drying them.
Cinco.
Yeah, Cinco. And those had a different... And then there were times when we decided we're gonna eat more of these than we typically do. We want to see. My friend was like, I really want to see. All right? I remember him hitting the floor that night. I heard his body hit the floor. He was standing in the middle of a kitchen talking to a girl, and the floor was checkered, black and white checkers, and I just heard this sound. And you know, I've heard other sounds in my life that I knew exactly what it was, and that was one of them. Like, that's a body stiffening up and falling like a plank onto the floor.
Plank.
I was talking to another roommate. This was a girl I had a crush on. My face was melting off. Nothing normal was coming out of my mouth. Not a big hit with the ladies.
So I dragged
Out of there. Yep, out of there we went. I don't think we ever talked to those young ladies again. They were like, never let those guys in here again. Okay. These experiences, and I maybe ingested these mushrooms 50 times, I don't know, over those 2 years, can't remember. But we did them in a context, without even knowing set and setting as a theoretical basis. We had a sense of, yeah, you don't want to be in any place weird. You don't want to be around other people. You don't want to have conflicting, pulls of energy, or somebody there demanding anything. So Frank and I had a very in tune to each other way of mushrooms together, taking these mushrooms. I will say this, for all our investigation of what we thought, I shouldn't speak for Frank, for all my investigation of what I thought was on the other side of that curtain, the veil of reality, I never found anything. I had these immensely psychedelic and reality skewing experiences where I would feel a level of connection, disconnection. It's hard to explain, but a road wasn't a road, an animal was not just an animal, a person wasn't just a person, and things took on extraordinary dimension. But after a couple years, I felt like I was losing my mind. In the sense that I wasn't coming out of these experiences with music or insights that I wasn't able to attain without them. After a while, I felt like, well, I was just using them to get high, to escape, not connect. And we did a whole bunch of weird shit, like we did some rituals where we tried to conjure up dead people and spirits, and we did play some concerts fucking high on this shit, and those were interesting because we didn't tell anybody, we were just there. But that was my final experience. There's no there that isn't here. Maybe these mushrooms gave me the sense that here is a very special place, especially viewed from a lens that knocks you out of your typical prejudgmental, prejudiced way of seeing the world as mundane or ordinary, unremarkable. And when I say those words, now I say them with huge amount of reverence. I see the extraordinary in everything. And I can trace that appreciation back to that experience. But I felt like I was losing my fucking mind, like I'd just taken too many. And not like the guy I knew who took too much ecstasy and literally was a different person, was gone. But these mushrooms did not do that. They didn't fuck you up in a chemical way, the way that chemistry lab drugs do. But they did alter something in me. Yep, the end of the world. My world was not the same. And right around that time, they stopped growing. We even went back a few times. After it rained, Frank would say, hey.
I went back to the temple.
And I would say, I was over there myself. Did you find anything? No. It looks the same, but they no longer grow there. No. We took that as a sign. Take it as you want. It was just the truth. They were no longer there. And I was relieved. A lot of respect for the experience, but also not grasping onto it and trying to live a life of constantly tripping, which I knew people who had that as a goal, stated goal. A few years ago, my children asked me, both my children, my daughter and my son, of course my son was alive. Whatever. They thought I was cool enough to say to me, Dad, would you be into doing mushrooms with us? Wow. On one hand, I was flattered or just honored that they would even consider me not like a bummer or a bad trip or too weird to trip with. I think they might have done them before, or why would they even be asking me? And I wasn't afraid of my kids doing mushrooms or psychedelics. I didn't want them doing anything chemical like LSD or things like that, but mushrooms seemed like it could be, therapeutic for them like it was for me. So I didn't want to prejudice against it. If it was good for me, why shouldn't they have the option? Pretty weird stuff. But I said to them, well, before I get to that, inside myself, I felt some fear. I don't know how else to say it, but I felt trepidation, fear. I had taken mushrooms in my 30s. It was always a shadow of that original experience. I don't know what the nature of that fear is. Maybe facing some emotion in front of my children that I couldn't handle. Some depth of strangeness or love or alteration that... And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I didn't want to normalize drug use. A sacrament, something special, those experiences that I had. And not that I wouldn't have had a special experience with my kids. There was a tension there. I didn't want to say to them, any and all drug use is okay. And I didn't know how not to sound hypocritical in the context of this particular conversation, but I was also afraid. I was afraid of revealing myself, not just to them, but to myself, because it's really hard to suppress your emotions on those kinds of psychedelic encounters. And some of the tears I shed during some of my mushroom taking were so dark. I was afraid of who I was and showing my children who I was. And I maybe regret it that I didn't have that experience with my son, with my daughter, the three of us together in some sort of safe way. I was also terrified of losing my son. That was in the back of my mind, even though he hadn't done anything fucking stupid like heroin for several years. I didn't want to reignite his lust. I was afraid of losing control.
5.
And I didn't even have control. So I said no. I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry. I cannot go back
1.
and change the past. I cannot rescue him. I cannot rescue him. Maybe. I can rescue myself. This has been part 1. Mr.Nobody. Out. What you believe could be so just to be again, not under this mountain of lies. You chose to chase what the dice would display. Each side of your face gave you twice to say. Remember the dove, a silhouette against the sky that signals the end of the world. The siren song. Remember the love that you're feeling will dry like the blood on the ceiling. The right words to say to soothe my mind, astray from the truth that find could bring on the end of the world. Once we would laugh and be free, and then fly in the wild open sky. Price I would pay just to be again, not under this mountain of lies. You chose to chase what the dice would display. Each side of your face gave you twice to say. A silhouette against the sky that signals the end of the world.